Hello and welcome to the Life and Leadership Podcast, where we develop military leaders one question at a time. I'm your host, Chris Fortier, and today we start a series of Senior NCO or Senior Non-Commissioned Officer Words of Wisdom, where we talk to senior enlisted personnel who are leading the teams with young officers as their senior-most subordinates and see their perspective on junior officer development. Pleasure to welcome Chief Gaudu, who has more than 30 years of uniform service across both the United States Air Force and Space Force. Chief, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity and look forward to talking with you today.
Just the disclaimer question before we get started. Are the views you express today your personal opinions or the official position of the United States military?
These would all be my personal opinions and my perspective from my time in service.
Can you just give a quick overview of that time of service?
Absolutely. So I joined the Air Force in 1993. Feels like a lifetime ago. I actually came into the service wanting to make a better life for my family. That was my purpose at the time. I had a 2-year-old daughter. She actually turned 2 while I was in basic training. So I was that mom that was in basic training, thinking I'm only going to do 4 years, make a better life for myself, get some military experience and some education benefits, and then I would probably move on with my life. However, as I proceeded through my service, I ended up deployed to Saudi Arabia, and I was there during the Khobar bombing. And it was that point in time that my purpose kind of changed. I felt like I was doing something that was bigger than myself, and just an admiration for our service members, our military service, and just protecting our country. And so that's kind of when everything changed for me. And I found myself re-enlisting at that 4-year mark while I was in Saudi Arabia. And from there, my career just kind of took off, and I served 27 years in the Air Force. 6 years of that was actually doing the space mission at Buckley Air Force Base at the time. And then I had to leave and went to Okinawa. And while I was there, that is where I met you, Chris. And so very cool that at that time we stood up our Space Force. And I thought, what the heck, let's give this a try. Maybe I can get back to that space mission that I really enjoyed. And they chose me. So very blessed. Got to cross over to the Space Force and finish out my last 3 years serving as one of the first Chief Master Sergeants in the Space Force. So that's just a little bit about my career.
So during your limited time as one of the first chiefs of the Space Force, is there an accomplishment that you're most proud of that you feel like left a legacy on a very young force?
Just to be given that opportunity and to touch so many lives. I think what I saw was, we saw with the Air Force as big as it grew, we had the opportunity with a smaller force to make some changes and to become a little bit more one-on-one and more personalized in how we approached assignments, how we took care of people. So for me, that was just a great opportunity. I was very blessed to be a part of Space Delta 4 doing the missile warning mission, which is where I had been before when I was in the Air Force. So to come back into that role as the Delta 4 chief and to be able to travel as we took on the ground-based radars around the world, to be able to travel and touch that many lives of our guardians and our airmen, that was just, I think for me, that was just one of the highlights of my career. And just, definitely something that I ended on a high note for sure. I really wanted to go past that 30-year mark, and I was kind of given that opportunity. But my husband was like, 30 years, I kind of want my wife back because I was traveling a lot. So we decided to hang up the uniform. And I feel like my legacy was just to get to be one of the first chiefs there at Delta 4 and to touch so many lives.
I mean, it's the impact on the people that you talked about that is one of the reasons I asked you to be here today, because all of the things you've seen over your 30 years in uniform, really just tapping into that perspective to help make sure the next generation is set up and empowered for success. So thinking about a young officer on his or her way to the first duty station, right, what are some good indicators that you would look for as a senior NCO that shows that this young officer is likely to succeed?
So for me, when I look back at the commanders that had the most impact on my life and getting to, going from that junior officer into more of that commander level, they all started out just having that people mindset, to be able to have that charismatic personality and to really, get to know the people that were placed in their charge, to actually show that they cared. And a lot of times, some of that came with a bit of sense of humor. This is a hard mission and a hard job. And so to make, those kind of relationships and to be able to walk up to somebody and make them smile and kind of take away a little bit of that stress and to actually be in tune to know, oh, that's not, that's kind of out of the norm for that particular airman or guardian. And to say, let me take a moment and ask them truly, how is their day and is there anything I can do to help? I mean, I think for me, when I look back at every great officer that I had in my career, it was always having that people side and that friendliness and being able to be approachable.
So right, if being approachable is a indicator of success, what's the other side of that coin? What's an indicator that, this young officer may need a little bit more support to develop into an effective CGO?
So on that flip side, I would say, those officers that weren't willing to lock arms with their senior NCOs and actually grow and ask questions and kind of start at that base level and, just wanting to do things on their own and their way and not actually listening to the folks around them and kind of, listening to the ideas and taking those under consideration and making sure to explain the why when decisions are made. I mean, that's huge. You can't just tell a person to go do and not give them the reason why they're going to do whatever it is that you've asked of them. They're buying into the mission, they're buying into you, so they just want to know what is it that they're actually doing for you. And you'll find, maybe it's not the most popular decision, but if you've earned that trust and that respect and there may even be times when you say, I need you to go do now, but I'm going to explain to you later why we're having to do this, and then follow up with that. Always the follow-up is key.
So Chief, pulling the thread on the idea of locking arms with the senior NCOs, could you describe, in your mind, what's the ideal working relationship between a young officer and their senior enlisted team?
So my ideal relationship would just be, actually seeing them together and, walking around and doing those checks on the airmen and the guardians and actually, discussing what's going on and, asking for the opinions of of each other, because just because that senior NCO is there with that young officer, that doesn't mean that young officer doesn't have a fresh perspective that senior NCO can learn from. So I would just say including them. I think it's valuable sometimes when you have some of your senior NCO meetings and you've got all of the senior NCOs in the room. Why not invite those junior officers and come together as a team? So that would be my ideal situation.
That sounds great. Right, get that working relationship to take care of the team. And that actually ties in great with our first question from the force.
How can Air Force CGOs best develop their airmen, especially their junior NCOs?
I think the best way that they can develop is to develop themselves. We had a program when I was an NCO. I'm trying to remember what they called it. I think it was Ace Lieutenant or something like that. But their job was to, I was working the help desk at the time, so their job was to sit right there with the young airmen that were learning that role and to learn it themselves. And I found, even as a chief, I was selected for a deployment. And the role they gave me was taking me back down to be a technician. And so here I am. At the time, I had just found out I made chief. I'm under the desks and I'm pulling cable and, doing everything that our airmen were doing at the time. And for me, it gave me great perspective on how they felt, what they did, what they were working on, and it kind of brought me back to my roots. So as junior officers, if you can get that kind of experience and feel what your airmen are feeling, you're definitely going to be much more empathetic, and you're going to be able to understand better what they're going through when you're asking them to actually take action on something.
I would say, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? That transparency, that communication. But taking a second and shifting lenses from, right, really talking to the young officers and the first time leaders to more those seasoned captains who have been leading for almost a decade but are still trying to work their way through the interpersonal relationship challenges of leadership. Um, Question from Drew out of Robbins Air Force Base. How do you maintain a working relationship with a senior NCO who you just can't trust?
That can be difficult. Definitely takes a practice in patience. You've got to be careful not to lose your cool, because once you've lost your cool and maybe you're acting in a way you shouldn't, you've lost a lot of credibility. And I have had those folks that will push my buttons, push my buttons, push my buttons until you snap, and then you feel horrible about it later. So I would say, in those moments, if you find yourself getting heated or it's something that you can't handle, it's better to walk away for the moment and collect your thoughts. I would say reach out to those trusted advisors that you have, whether it's your commanders, whether it's another senior NCO, get some ideas on how to approach. I would just be careful about, gossiping or, name calling or things like that, because the last thing you want to do is bring negativity to your team. And sometimes that can be hard when you need that release. Sometimes you just want to say what you need to say, but you do have great influence. So you really have to collect your thoughts and be careful what you put out there. And then what I found over time is sometimes not everybody's meant to be in the military, and not everybody is meant to be part of your team, and that will typically work itself on its own, but it just may take some time and some patience on your part.
It's definitely a tough situation, but I want to expand on the idea of that network of trusted advisors that you talked about. Right? How important would you say that it is for a young officer to really develop that mentorship network?
I think it's extremely important. You don't want to feel like you're on an island alone, and there's nobody there to support you, because even as a junior officer first coming in, just like those airmen, you don't know what you're walking into. You're not quite sure of what to expect. It takes a bit to learn the life of being a military member. And so, make those relationships. You're going to need those friendships. I think some of the best junior officers that I've seen are engaged with the is it the CGO and the FGO members, their different clubs, and just using each other as soundboards. When it's something tough, definitely reach out to somebody that's got a little more experience and just say, "This is what I'm going through." Don't be afraid to speak up. You know, the worst thing that can happen is somebody feel like they're alone, and then it gets to a point where it's just we've lost them, and we don't want that. For one, we want to maintain you in our service, and two, we want to make sure that your mental health is where it needs to be, because this is hard. It is a hard life, and that's why only 1% of the whole, population is actually in the military. We're a very unique group. We do unique things, and sometimes that becomes difficult. So we need to rely on our brothers and sisters to help us through.
And it's tough when you can't always rely on the people to your left and to your right. Our last question from the force is coming from Greg out of Eglin Air Force Base. How should I balance my desires to learn from my team and provide them with top cover with the fact that some of my senior NCOs are just bad at their jobs?
I would say, well, part of that is your responsibility to cultivate, as you grow into a more seasoned officer, you need to be helping to cultivate those good senior NCOs. So what is it that you're deeming bad, and is it something that maybe you can turn around? Can you help them, whether it's through, professional development courses. Maybe it's just a heart-to-heart conversation. One of the commanders that I had, his go-to phrase was "help me understand," and I was like, man, that takes the pressure off a lot of things. If you can bring somebody in and they've done something, and you can say, "Help me understand why you did this," and then gain a better understanding of why they're doing what they're doing, and then offer maybe other solutions to whatever it is that you're deeming bad. Definitely a tough situation, and again, one of those things where you need to rely on your team to, go to that mentor that you trust and say, "This is happening. What are your thoughts?" Get that outside perspective, because what if it's you? Maybe things aren't bad.
Can you expand on just your experience sitting down and having those hard conversations? Right, what's the right way to initiate that?
It's hard. I'm not a confrontational person, and so I was very blessed, I think, to have great teams along the way. So those conversations were few and far between. But the few that I did have, it was a matter of, for one, bringing them in private. I'm sure you've all been taught, do not ever punish in public. You always do that in private. If you're going to reward, absolutely do that in public. But bring them in and just sit down. And again, with that whole phrase, "help me understand," something's going on here. And, this is what we've been charged to do. We all know, our code of ethics. We know everything that we should be doing. We've been taught along the way. And this is what I see that's outside of what, we've been taught. So help me understand what's going on. And a lot of times, if you really engage, you're going to find out maybe there was something in their personal life that is kind of driving some personality changes at work. So don't be afraid to insert yourself. Um, we, again, small force, we're family. And so sometimes you might have to get into somebody's personal business to say, "Hey, we can't allow this mission to fail, and I see something's wrong. Is there something going on at home that I can assist with," and help them through that? There are so many helping agencies in our services that know those and be prepared, be able to pull that out on the spot and say, "Let's get you the help you need and get you going in the right direction." And if somebody confides in you, I would say don't keep it secret to a certain point, but you need to be making sure that you're not just being the sounding board and then letting them walk out the door without giving them some good resources and then following up. The follow up, again, key. You can't ever just let them walk out the door thinking everything's all right. You've got to continually follow up.
And taking care of the people in order to take care of the mission. It's that balancing act. So is there a good resource that a young Air Force or Space Force officer can go to see all of the different helping agencies that are there to help them take care of their troops?
Oh, absolutely. If you go to your military personnel flight, they will get you pointed in the right direction. Typically, the commanders will get briefs, but I absolutely think the junior officers need to get those same briefs on what's available. When I first came in, I will say, mental health's a big thing. And when I first came in, there was a little bit of taboo to mental health. If you had a security clearance, you were worried about losing your clearance. There were all sorts of repercussions that we worried about. So we didn't really look after our mental health too well. One thing I was very proud of is as I rolled into the Space Force, I had an amazing commander who saw mental health like physical health. We get a PT test every year, and we kind of get that, kind of get that measurement of where we are physically. And so, we don't do that mentally. And so he really was a very strong advocate of going out and just sometimes you need to talk to a mental health professional, whether it's just I had a bad week and I'm really feeling it, or maybe it's something more significant. And so with that, I mean, there was a lot. I would say that first 27 years that, I just kind of pushed down and never really addressed. So that last 3 years to start talking to somebody to say, "Hey, here's some issues that I have." And it wasn't all military related. Some of it was my childhood. Some of it was my upbringing, maybe, the loss of my father. There were things that impacted me and changed me along that 30 years. And So to realize that we're changing our mindset and saying, hey, it's okay to go talk to somebody, that was very important. So definitely engage with the military personnel flight and get access to all those services.
And thinking about units that didn't have that same emphasis on mental health, were you able to see how that had a carry-on effect to also impact the mission?
Absolutely. I mean, if somebody is down, they're not going to be at their best. And sometimes it's better to recognize that somebody's having, some issues and to let them go for the day and say, hey, let's get you out of here and let's go talk to somebody. We can't always let the mission dictate, you know, I get it. There's a mission that needs to go on, but it's not, sometimes it's at the detriment of the mission to have folks there that just, they need that moment to get what they need, whether it's mentally, maybe it's exhaustion. I think we really have to take a look at what is it that our people need in that moment. Are they coming in, happy, motivated? Are they, inspired to do the mission? And that's very tough. Sometimes it's hard to keep selling, hey, we're working these long shifts, or, we've got this exercise coming up, do they understand the purpose of the exercise? Do they understand why maybe we're stretching them a little thin at this moment, but this is what we're going to do to get better? So hang on. And there are those moments that people have to understand, we just got to hang on for just a little bit longer, and relief is coming. So I think that's very important for officers to make sure that they, relay that message to our folks to keep them going.
Absolutely. And there's so much there, right? Judgment, communication, things that skills that it takes time to develop, but that our senior NCOs have already put the time into learning. So, right, that's a great example of an area for a young officer to sit down with senior NCO team and go, hey, here's the challenge. Here's the way I'm thinking about it. How do we communicate this to the team? And just, again, sit down in a room and just work through the problem in a way that everybody can come together and get the job done.
Right.
Chief, I thoroughly appreciate your time. Just one last question, right? We talked about a lot of different things. If you could give one piece of advice to a new officer about to arrive to his or her first duty station, what would you tell them?
So my first piece of advice, I mean, I probably have plenty of advice that I could give, but I would just say make sure that you're locking arms not only with your commanders, but with your senior NCOs. And, nobody's perfect. We're in this together. So, lock arms with them, learn as much as you can, from your airmen and your guardians. Get that perspective, because that's going to make a world of difference. Gain as much experience as you can. Always take any opportunity that's given to you, whether you want to do it or not. It is going to make you realize that it's just going to give you more experience, and it's something maybe you weren't even interested in, and it's going to open your mind and give you more perspective, and that's what we need. And then never stop innovating. I mean, you guys are coming in with the fresh minds. Got bright new ideas, and that's what needs to be. That's what we need. And so just make sure that you're approaching those ideas, making sure that your senior NCOs and your commanders are hearing them, and then be patient, because sometimes change is not always easy. So I think that would be my best advice to you.
Well, thank you, Chief. Man, just appreciate you taking the time to really talk through the 30 years of hard-won experience. If viewers have questions, may the foundation reach out and contact you and forward you those questions?
Absolutely. I would love to hear from anybody.
Well, I appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate you. I appreciate this opportunity.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, and share, or just check out one of our other interviews. You can also visit our website via the link below to submit your questions so you can participate in the next interview.